all. Good afternoon again, or good morning. I don't know. Is it late morning, Hoba? No, it's around 1 o'clock in the Philippines. Perhaps late morning in Thailand now. So welcome everyone to this online conversation, wherever you may be. Good morning, good afternoon. Let me start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands upon which the MONAS campuses are situated. I pay respect to the leaders, past, present, and emerging, of the lands and the waterways of Australia and of Indonesia, of Thailand, and my own hometown of Mindanao in the Philippines. Welcome everyone to this online conversation on colors of development, navigating diversity, gender diversity. As I mentioned, this is organized by the Monash International Development Practice Association, based in Monash University here in Melbourne, Australia. I am Nelia. I will be your moderator as mentioned. I am the Education Events Officer of MITPA. As mentioned, this is, I think, in either the posters or the letters or whatever registration sheets that you have received. And thank you for joining us. This is the second of our series of online conversation on development practice in the real world. We see this as a good platform for students and practitioners to engage in conversations about the realities of development practice in the field. Thank you for joining us from Melbourne. We acknowledge the elders of Melbourne, Australia, Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Thank you for joining us. And let me now acknowledge our amazing panelists. If we can put the slide off already, Alexis. So maybe just the platform. We can show that later maybe. But Dede Oetomo, can we put everybody on gallery? Hey, Dede is the founder of the GAYA NUSANTARA Foundation, which is the country's longest-standing gay rights organization, and he is widely considered to be, and he knows I stalked him for this, he is widely considered to be the godfather, not grandfather, Dede, godfather of the Indonesia's gay rights movement. Bong Antonio, as I mentioned earlier, is a good friend of mine. We go back way to, in college, the Protest Theater of UP Diliman. He is an international development consultant on gender equality, culture, and diversity, and sustainable development. And he has worked with several international organizations. I will also do a longer introduction later when I introduce them when they start their own individual talks. Wannapong Yodmuang, we call him Hernoon, is an executive board member of the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans, and Intersex Association of Asia. We were supposed to have 4 panelists for today, but Roshana sends her apologies as she cannot join us for this conversation. So will put their bios also on the box, on the chat box, so that you're able to refer to their bios as we go along. Let me just quickly share that in terms of the flow, we will commence immediately after I am talking. We will commence immediately with the panel discussion and followed by breakout sessions. We have decided to allot 30 minutes for the breakout sessions, which was a feedback from our past session, where participants wanted longer time for the breakout groups. So we have 3 panelists now, and we have requested them. If not, then it's the first time perhaps some of them are hearing this. My apologies. So we will be moving the panelists to the breakout rooms at the 10-minute mark, so that all of the participants are able to engage with our panelists throughout the breakouts. So at the 10-minute mark, we will be migrating our panelists to another room. Again, we'll also put the flow of our program in the chat box so that you're able to gauge where we are in the conversation. So we're running this till 4:30, and we hope to close by 4:30, as we promised the world that we will close by 4:30. On the structure of the sharing of the panelists, we will be adapting what I just learned the other day. So it came as a surprise to my fellows in the team and to the panelists. My apologies again. So we're adopting the Learn, Enable, Act, Influence framework. Perhaps maybe Alexis can try putting it on the chat box, the Learn or please. Learn, Enable, Act, Influence framework, which is the strategies for creating impact. And this one, we're talking about Learn, Enable, Act, Influence for creating impact on gender diversity. Through our development policies, programs, or networks. This was something inspired by a symposium I attended that was organized by University of Melbourne. The workshop was facilitated by ARU, and they used this framework. So we're adopting that. So for each of the strategies or the elements of the framework, we'll have a discussant, somebody to talk about learn, somebody talks about enable, somebody talks about act, and then somebody talks about influence. So there'll be a discussion for each of the strategies, and there'll be a short poll. That's why we're asking you to please keep your Menti open the whole time. There will be a short poll each right before each of the talks. So before we move on, let me say, and this has been an observation I've had in the course of coordinating for this particular session, let me just say that I do anticipate that some of the points or the questions that may emerge here may be quite uncomfortable for some. But I do, and I look forward, and I hope you share with me my wish for us to deal with this discomfort. Because if any, this discomfort we're dealing in the spirit of knowing and appreciating diversity among us here in our respective spaces. So we're about to start with the panel discussion. We're about to start with Learn. And as I said, each and every talk will have a quick poll. So maybe Alexis can put up the poll. Is everyone okay? Does everyone have the Menti already? Either a nod or, okay. Thanks, Sophie.
Is there a code to getting Menti?
Hi, Soumya.
Hi.
Hello. Alexis can put in the code as well, but you just have to go to, just access www.menti.com and then put in the code there. Yeah.
Everyone, it's not Menti, but
Menti.
it's AHA slides.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, put on the link, just put in there MIDPA.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go for this.
Where is AHA slides, live polls?
Yeah, so after the polls, I'll introduce Dede, and then he can give his 5-minute talk on Learn.
Yeah.
All right, fire away. Do you have the poll results first?
Well, the poll is not showing up.
Okay, there. So the
Oh.
first poll question, which Dede is asking us all, is this: are all men who have sex with other men gay?
Yeah, it's saying that the presentation's not open, Nelia. It's presented to start it. So I'm not sure if Alexis or has to change a setting or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just some technical
Okay.
problems, sorry.
That's fine. So while Alexis is sorting out, just give me a sign, Alexis, if you're ready. I'll introduce Dede already while you're sorting out the technical problems with our polling. So let me start with saying and sharing that. So this week, Lachlan knows it, Soumya knows it. So we received our materials for class this week on gender and development. So I watched one of the videos, and there was a line that said, in that video, one of the speakers said, "We cannot solve problems. We cannot solve what we cannot name." And I guess that's part of this challenge. We need to be able to solve. We need to be able to name so we can solve and we can work on it. So are we ready? Everyone can access Menti already? Submission is locked.
Yes. So we cannot.
Okay, so
we
maybe
can
you
actually see the. We can actually see it now. Okay, now it's going. Yeah.
Okay.
Ah.
Okay. So are all men who have sex with other women gay? So Muslim, no. Next, Alexis. So we just have 3 questions for this. So our speaker goes, is a trans woman gay? It's also a no. And some say yes. Okay. And the last question, is a trans woman a woman? Yes. And there's a no. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Let me introduce again first Dede. So as I mentioned, so I was watching a video and there was a line that said, we cannot solve what we cannot name. And I guess that's what we needed to do today. At first onset, we need to name things. We need to name what the phenomenon is or what the constructs are in gender diversity. So I think this is an appropriate way to introduce Dede. And he's sharing on Learn. And Learn is about building capacity, insight, foresight, deep expertise on gender diversity. Dede is now talking to us from Indonesia. He's an independent scholar, educator, and activist in research, education, and advocacy in the fields of language and society, HIV and AIDS, and sexuality. So aside from what I mentioned earlier, he founded GAYA NUSANTARA Foundation and said in the process that he's the godfather, considered to be the godfather of the gay rights movements in Indonesia. He is also the chair of the Regional Advisory Group of APCOM Foundation. We'll put the link on the screen later, on the chat later. And he also sits in the advisory committee of the Coalition for Sexual and Bodily Rights in Muslim Societies. All right, so starting off with the poll results, perhaps Dede can help us understand why we need to understand the language and constructs of gender diversity and what it means in the current context. Dede, please.
Yeah, thank you, Nelia. I'm actually quite pleased to see the results for the first question. So I think everybody understands the difference between gay men and just other, we call them other men who have sex with men. I'll explain later how that developed. The thing about trans women, I mean, of course, people could disagree with that. I'll also explain later on, and I'll share the development of the concept for almost 40 years, actually, which I've been around long enough. And the third one, what was the third one? It's that's controversial. That's controversial. It's a trans woman, a woman. Like I said, later maybe Noon could actually weigh in her presentation. But basically, what I'm going to share about the Learn is how, in the so-called community of activists that started kind of waking up, or being prepared for the advent of HIV in the late 80s, early 90s, we were naive in a way, and our consultants are usually from the West, because in the West, I mean, it's a gay man's disease. I mean, not. Especially in North America, in Australia, in Western Europe. So they came to places like Indonesia, Thailand, and oh yeah, it's a gay man's disease. And of course they're already confused, because some of the locals say, oh yeah, it's a katay, the term for trans women in Thailand, or the waria. Oh yeah, they're gay. And then at least in Indonesia, the waria, the trans women said, no, we're not gay. It's still people in the other park and things like that. So that kind of confused them. But some of the consultants and academics who started advising WHO and international private organizations, they started realizing this is not right. And they also, some of them are good ethnographers, good anthropologists. So I remember there was a Dutch anthropologist who went to the field, the field, basically the parks and where people actually look for sex, and there's a whole different world there. And once they're out of the park, they're just men, but they do have sex with other men. Yeah. And then when the anthropologists, sometimes with interpretation, with the translation, or I think there was one Indian anthropologist who already did that, but he was not doing sexual research. They found out that if, again, like the Katay or the Waria, if you ask about gay, they know who the gay men are. Oh yeah, it's those guys in the hotels. It's those guys in the in the elite clubs, and so that actually made people in WHO, in academia who were doing research on so-called gender diversity amongst I suppose, for one of a better term, amongst males. Or sometimes people just say, a bit coarsely, humans with penis, because sometimes this is very interesting. We learned that yes, the behavior, of course, uses the body you have, but the meaning you attach to the behavior could be different. So in Indonesia, we found out that gay men, other MSM, and trans women, they may engage in some of the same sexual acts, but for them it's a different frequency, it's a different meaning. Later, maybe in the breakout group, I'll explain, because I only have 5 minutes. So basically, that's what we learned, and I'm actually quite pleased, that almost 40 years down the line, everybody in this group actually know about gay men and other men who have sex with men. For whatever reason, and I think the second question actually, I already mentioned how trans women were they objected being lumped together with gay men and other MSM. So when APCOM was founded in 2007. We had a meeting in Delhi in 2006, and the trans women were saying, all our life we fought not to be men, and you put us back together with you guys, and you're so smart, you're so educated. At that time, we were not so educated, and no, we want to be different. I think I know Noon was with APTN, the Asia Pacific Transgender Network. That was the result from the, I guess, if this were, we were a church, it was a schism, so we actually kind of parted ways at the Asia Pacific level. That, trans women and actually trans men, and that makes it a bit confusing. I'll talk about it in the breakout room later. They want to organize separately, but not always. At the island Southeast Asia level, we used to have a network called ICAN, Island Southeast Asia network of gay men, other MSM, and trans women. The trans women would like to be with the gay men. They know they're not gay men, but they'd like to work together. In Indonesia as well. I'm not sure about Thailand. Maybe Noon later will be able to explain. And this is what we learned also, that in every country, even every locality, we have to be careful. You cannot just lump together. I mean, if something works in, let's say, Bangkok, you cannot take it to a small town in Sulawesi, in Indonesia, or things like that. I mean, places like that. So this is what we learned about gender diversity. And I think the lesson learned, that the takeaway lesson is listen to the people in the field. Use their own terms, respect their terms, don't just lump together. I mean, this is where the thing about women come up. Some people who are doing studies, at least in Indonesia, they are very rude to trans women. Oh, come on, you're men. And in public meetings, this is rude, isn't it? You're men. Come on, you have a penis. So this is, in theoretical lingo, it's actually between essentialism. If you have a penis, you're a man. Not necessarily. Yeah, and then later on come the trans men, and they are men without penises, but they're men. But they prefer at the Asia Pacific level to organize with the trans women. But something that don't think we have, I'll stop after this, that we haven't really solved is actually, if the trans man is gay, meaning that he's a trans man liking other men, where do they go? with the gay men and other MSM, or with the trans? So, okay, time is up. Good, thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Dede. That was a mouthful. So many things in so many things in it. Again, I sat with Dede 2 nights ago, I think, for an hour and a half. So that was my gender diversity 101. So what I'm taking away from this is that the behavior with your body is not may not be the same with the meaning that you put to your body. And you were saying you cannot lump together same things you do for one particular part of the diversity. You cannot do it for the other parts of the entire range of. I don't even know if we're already able to talk about an entire range of the diversity. At the same time, you said listen to the people, respect their terms. So the questions that were asked earlier were questions that were really meant for us to be, to face these constructs, these terms, like straight right in the eye. And then remember, you also mentioned about essentialism versus constructionism, which are really important, frameworks by which we navigate the concepts and the whole world of gender diversity. Wow. Thank you, Dede, for making us go through learning more about gender diversity. Let me now go to the next part, which is on enable. And are you ready, Alexis, with your questions? We'll have another set of questions for the session of noon.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's ILGA. No? No.
All right. So most said 18. All right.
That's wrong.
So how many countries, as of now, how many member states allowed for legal gender recognition without prohibitive requirements? So most say 9. Mm-hmm.
So
all
the
right.
correct answer is 25.
25. Okay. The correct answer to the first one was?
Yeah, we've got 29.
29.
Okay. Should be 29 countries have legalized same-sex marriage. All right.
Third question would be, in your opinion, what type of program project are the most compatible to address SOGSC issues? Yeah, for this one, this has Noon would explain it further later. Yeah. And the last question would be, should trans people be treated the same as others?
That's a tough one.
Dede, that's a tough one, Dede.
Oops, sorry.
So I'll forward the floor to Noon, and I'll stop sharing.
Okay, let me introduce Noon. So allow me to introduce Wannapong Yodmuang. Noon, we've learned his name is. She's from Thailand. She received her law degree from the Thammasat University in Thailand and pursued her Master's of Law in International Human Rights Law in the University of Essex. She used to work as a program officer at the Asia Pacific Transgender Network and the human rights researcher at the Manusha Foundation. She was also with the United Nations Development Program and other international organizations where she did researches on legal gender recognition and employment discrimination against trans individuals. She also had years of experience in working on compliance of national laws, 5 laws in particular, compliance with international human rights standards, and has also worked with UN human rights monitoring mechanisms. So we're asking Noon to talk about her experiences in enabling, which is about integrating gender diversity in policy, framework, systems, operations, people, and practice. And she'll talk about her experience in policy and advocacy as enablers of gender diversity. So Noon, your 5 minutes.
Okay, it's only 5 minutes, right? So I will be quick I have many points to make though, but I will be very quick. So my name is Noon. You can Wannapong Yodmuang, and you can call me shortly like Noon. And my pronoun is she, her. And my background is like Nelia talk about. My background is about the it's about the trans right. It's mostly about the trans right. And so my talk gonna be a little bit like radicals about the trans resistance, and also kind of like focus on where trans right. And I will bring a lot of example about trans also, because it's kind of biased, but that is based on my experience. And it's about and my work is only around Asia also. That's why I'm not gonna bring the example from out of the Asia to make to this sessions. The first thing I would like to talk about is the trends and understanding about the trans development of the LGBTI rights. And the point I would like to make is that gender. So from the gender mainstreaming at UN, and there's a lot of people, a lot of UN agencies adopt this type of policy of gender mainstreaming back to the time, including the UN Development Agency, including the what is called the donor country also. They kind of like adopt this kind of approach and implement it in all of their programs, all of their activities, all of their approach in development. But again, for my observation, my work is from my experience of when I work with those development agencies. The main agenda and the mainstream agenda, or the indicators of the development of LGBTI rights, is marriage equality, is the same-sex marriage. So they kind of like, so this type of agenda is very like, is people kind of like understand that if marriage equality or what is called the same-sex marriage happen in country, it's like the achievement, it's like a huge achievement. But I would like to question this type of approach, that where trans people are in this approach, right? Where trans people are in this approach, and what does it mean? What does it mean to trans people? Because some of the trans people, like, not every trans people commit to marriage. And some of the trans people don't have, like, even their marriage, they cannot, they live in very different status of gay. They live in the very different status of like men and women. So where is trans people in this type of agenda? It's mainstream, but where is trans people in this agenda? And the second question is that when you saw this second question in Menti, I bring this up because the legal gender recognition is type of another mainstream objective, mainstream approach that is kind of like recognized as the huge achievement of trans people also. But again, it's not that recognized by the international community compared to the agenda of same-sex marriage. And also this type of legal approach, how this type of legal approach means to the trans people who can, in the Asia country, who cannot access to the basic rights. So if you get the name title change, you get the new gender marker, but again, you cannot access to the basic needs. What does it mean? What does it mean to the transgender people? Some of the people say that when you get the name title change, it's going to prevent the discrimination against trans people, right? Because some of the trans people, when they access to the social welfare, they're going to get discriminated because the gender marker is not in line with their own the gender legal gender marker. Is like in the legal document. It's not incorporated. It's not the same. So they get discriminated. But again, if, for example, in South Asia, the gender, what is called the in Nepal, right? In Pakistan, transgender can change their name title, gender marker, but there are no social welfare that specifically explicitly address trans rights. So we have the gender marker change, but our life is not going to be better. So that is like the question that I want to make also. And so what I want to say to the development practitioners or development agency, something like that, is like, so there are 3 approaches that used this day. There are 3 approaches that's used this day. So the first one is the gender neutral approach, which is like, okay, we're gonna treat all the people the same. We're gonna treat all the people the same. But again, treating the same is and include everyone into the same structure. But the structure is binary and patriarchal at the first place. So how is gonna make the change to the ground, right? Is the first one. Is the first gender neutral approach. It's like treat everyone the same, regardless gender, right? And the second one is the gender responsive. Okay, we recognize the difference between people. We recognize the difference between people. Women are different, trans people are different, and we want to do something good to them. So we make women, we make some project for the trans women, and we include them. We're gonna give them fund to do some, beauty products, to be the entertainer or something like that. Yeah, it's like, or we're gonna have a quota in our organization to hire more trans people. But what it actually means to trans people, living in the country that criminalize them, they live in the miserable life, and they cannot even write the application to apply to some of the company. What does this mean? So the last approach that I encourage people to think, I don't have the answer, I don't have the correct justification for this one, because this gender transformative approach is very new for many people also. Even trans organizations still use the gender responsive approach. So this is very new. But again, we need to think about how we gonna like challenge the norms a little bit when our mindset stuck in the binary way, when our mindset stuck in the very patriarchal. How we gonna change what the things not gonna change if we do the same thing. And we need to challenge the norms, and also, like Dede said, we need to include transgender and give the decision-making power to them, for them to decide what is the equality to them, what's gonna make their life better, and no more top-down approach and things on behalf of them. So we need more kind of gender transformative approach. That's kind of like the point that I would like to make.
Yes, thank you, Noon. I was just thinking about what you said about, instead of, we better be very cautious about the things that we do, because the policies that you mentioned, we're meant to be enabling, we're meant to put them on the mainstream, but in fact sidestep them and disable the trans in the process. So things we thought are good for them, as Dede has said, we need to listen to them. We need to understand the terms, and we need to know where they are, because that's how we're starting. Thank you, Noon. Can I call on Bong now? Bong will talk about, as I mentioned earlier, he'll talk about both ACT and influence. And if it's okay with Bong, he can go straight away and discuss the two, how do you say, strategies immediately. Can we do the poll first, Alexis? Both for, yeah, both for ACT and for influence. So here's the question on, do development interventions impact positively on women, girls, and all genders? Oh, more said no. All right. So this is on influence. Will an LGBTQI person be the ideal influencer to advocate for gender diversity? Oh, yes. More yes and none of no. Interesting. And this is a question both for programming, for ACT, and for influence. Is social inclusion the better lens to promote gender diversity? Okay. Thank you, everyone. It's 100% yes for that poll question. Thank you, everyone, for your responses. Now we're moving on. So we did learn. We had enable. We're going to ACT and straight away to influence. On ACT, it's about delivering solutions that value and promote gender diversity. It talks about planning power that delivers on the full spectrum of gender diversity, with each action, each program, project, activity informed and examined by their consistency with the policy objectives of gender diversity. So on influence, we're saying that the whole point of change, it needs people behind it. Thus, the importance of influence is to create impact on gender diversity by using knowledge and networks to shape development with a very clear gender diversity agenda, which is about also engaging ourselves as the drivers of change and other drivers of gender diversity through such strategies as advocacy and commitments, thought leadership, and partnerships. For both of these subtopics, I have requested Bong to speak on it. Bong is an international development consultant, as mentioned earlier. He has been working with multilateral development agencies such as the World Bank and numerous other United Nations agencies, and is now currently a gender equality and social inclusion consultant of the Asian Development Bank. So Bong, you have about 8 minutes for your two topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonet. Good afternoon. It's afternoon in the Philippines, and I'm coming from Quezon City in Metro Manila. Okay, let me go straight to my topic. It's on ACT and influence. But before that, I may just give you the context of where my practice is coming from. So started working with international development agencies on gender mainstreaming from specifically in the Philippines, and moving on in partnering with the national government agencies and local government units in strengthening their gender and development programs. Basically, as the law provides in the Philippines, the strategy is on gender mainstreaming. And very recently, as you know, Philippines has a very good history of movements on gender equality. And I think that's really a good backdrop also to look at diversity in the how the country have reached the debate on diversity. Let me just bring this to the point that the movements, even the movements of LGBTQI++ rights in the Philippines would find its roots in the activism of women empowerment and gender equality. I have learned over the course of years of doing development work is that some local government units or some national government agencies are more effective in gender mainstreaming when they understand that basic concept of gender equality and women empowerment. And then that slowly we can move them on further to look at diversity and social inclusion concepts and social inclusion actions. So the bulk of the work I'm doing now is on gender equality, disability, and social inclusion. And when we do that, acting on that context, we learned, I personally learned that it's very important to act with a purpose. know what actions are to be integrated in development practice to make sure that it jives with development outcomes and development outputs that a particular development intervention wants to achieve. So the first thing is that I always keep in mind is to know the rainbow or embrace diversity. Leave it as development practitioners. We don't have no excuse not to know the diversity of colors. It's very important for us to know each of these colors that makes up that diversity, including intersectionalities of this diversity. It's not enough to know LGBTQI++, it's not enough to know SOGSC, but also to know them in the perspective, in the context of individual societal, cultural and traditional makeup, like knowing how it impacts on indigenous community, knowing how this diversity and inclusion would impact on people with disability, how it will impact on senior citizens or people, senior citizens who are LGBT, who are who would also require inclusion inclusion actions, for instance. Another one for on the context of is to know the global and local instruments that can enable or even restrain gender equality. So we need to be grounded on the global conventions. If we're working on a context of a country, know the commitments of this particular country when it comes to human rights, know the commitments when it comes to gender equality rights, knowing how the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, for instance, would impact on your social inclusion approaches, how social and economic rights will impact on your social inclusion approaches. It's also important to know policies, gender policies and inclusion policies, even at the local level. So working with governments, working with local government units, the policy environment can either drive or restrain any social inclusion or any gender equality and women empowerment approaches that we want to do. Moving on to influencing. So having that, knowing the sector, knowing your instruments, what we can use, what we can adopt, or what we can capitalize on in acting with purpose for social inclusion, we move on to influencing with conviction. And this is where the work actually starts as development practitioner. First, it's important for us to know the issues. In the course of the work that we do, for instance, even in infrastructure projects that we're helping build now, the gender analysis component and gathering sex disaggregated data is very important. Again, this backs up on data that you will use to understand diversity, that you will use to understand inclusion processes. And this data should be credible, capturing the different dimensions of this aggregation. So I think it's important for us to know that we have moved beyond binary disaggregation, male, female, to different levels of disaggregation, including migration, including age, and the rest. It would be good for us to review the disaggregation concept of the Sustainable Development Goals, because that really fits into how well you have your data with you and how well you are able to use that to influence actions, to influence movements on the ground, even to influence policy and to influence program and project development. Another in influencing is to know your allies. There's a movement happening that LGBTQI groups cannot do it alone. The allies play an important role to move on that agenda further. So we're in the Philippines, for instance, particularly in Metro Manila, we're happy to note, for instance, how the Pride marches, if you're familiar with the Pride marches, is shaping now from an exclusive LGBT community, building it up, including allies, non-LGBTs, but who support the LGBTQI+ agenda. And that's important, very important to build that network around issues that, especially issues that matter most in terms of diversity and in terms of inclusion. I'd like to tie up just on ACT and influence, and also part of the learnings, part of the knowledge that I'm gaining from the work I'm doing now is basically looking at issues, addressing issues that captures the interest of a wider stakeholder. So the gender mainstreaming work that I have done, for instance, at the sectoral level, for instance, we was able to do work on integrated WASH, integrated water sanitation and hygiene. Now we're doing gender mainstreaming on transport system. We're building a railway system in Metro Manila. And it's also really a good opportunity to bring in the gender dimensions into these processes. And of course, doing rehabilitation of a town, no, that just went through a very violent process of brought about by unpeace. And what we're learning is, as part of the gender analysis that we're doing, is to look for issues that really cuts across. Access to basic resources, access to basic services is one of them, and it's a good influencing, or it's a good takeoff point for inclusion, for ensuring that gender equality is mainstreamed even at the perspective of disability and diversity. So access to transportation cuts across, but then again, as Noon have said, the analysis should cater to the needs and the experiences of each of the sector in the diversity umbrella. So it's very good to, for instance, do focus group discussions specifically on the experiences of trans women and men in accessing public transportation. That comes in very well into the design, and that feeds very well into the operations and maintenance of transport system, even to the point of pinpointing experiences of gender-based violence in accessing basic services. For water, sanitation, and hygiene, the use of these facilities plays a very critical role in well-beings and acceptance of LGBTQI+ in community where these facilities are being built. We know that there are gender-based violence happening even in programs and projects like WASH. We're happy, for instance, in the Philippines, that there are innovations already on how these facilities are to be built. For instance, even at the women empowerment level or women needs, strategic needs level, the ratio now is for 1:2. For every 1 male comfort room, as policy-wise, 2 female comfort rooms will need to be built. But of course, we need to push that it's a good entry point, but we need to push that forward towards looking at how this impacts on LGBTQI+. No, I'm sure you're familiar with an incident that, well, it's happening in the Philippines, and I think it's also happening in other countries, of trans women, for instance, being not allowed in comfort rooms for women. And so that kind of, those issues need to be talked about upfront at program development, even at program design, and even at already at implementation of the project. Okay, the last point on the influence. I'm sorry, I just need to shift because it's connected. The influence level at national policy and even at program planning and budgeting, that's where the voices needs to be heard. Sometimes the instruments are there, but without the intervention of development practitioners who are well versed on the issues of diversity, these instruments are set aside. So It's good for us to work with networks, not necessarily LGBTQI plus networks. It's also good to work with women's networks because they have a longer history. In the Philippines, for instance, they have a longer history of lobbying, longer history of working with government, working with politicians, and we want to capitalize on that history of working closely with government or the policymakers, those who decide on budget and those who decide on programs. So let me end there for now. If I'll turn the floor again to our moderator. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Hi, thank you, Bong. I won't even speak now. Let's proceed to the breakout rooms because I think you want to engage our panelists into the conversations and questions that you have. So we'll go straight ahead into the breakout rooms. We mentioned, I think I mentioned at the start, but I'll mention this again. We will be randomly allocating you to any of the 3 rooms. At the 10-minute mark, we will be migrating the panelists to another room so that each of you will have the chance to interact with them. All right, let's go straight. Alexis will be sending you a message at the 9-minute mark to wrap up your conversation. Okay, we're ready to go there.
Maybe we can start with some of the questions from the participants. I think like you have already discussed some of the things, so maybe we can start with the questions. So I'd like to ask the participants if they have any questions for Bong for this conversation.
Okay, maybe we can, if it's okay with, I guess you're still thinking about your questions, maybe Sophie, but there's one question here that came from, because when you registered, we asked you for your questions, right? So maybe I can start just to initiate the conversation. There's a question here, Bong, about how do programs balance respectful conduct in appropriate context for gender inclusivity, or maybe this is gender inclusion. So how do programs balance respectful conduct and appropriate context for gender inclusion? Is there a best practice on this? And is there an ideal participation for the different genders in a program? Yeah, let me start.
Okay, what we're learning over the years, from if you look at when gender mainstreaming concept was introduced, the Beijing platform, for instance, 20 plus years already, we're looking at gender analysis as really a key point to know that the development terrain, without gender without gender analysis, you will not know what the gender issues are at the local level, how particular communities behave in terms of acceptance to development interventions, how they go about their daily lives and negotiate that with any existing programs and projects being implemented as they go about their daily lives. And knowing that is important. Then and only can you negotiate and traverse that terrain of very sensitive development, very sensitive traditions, where we want to anchor our development goals and outputs. So that's one. The analysis would point out that a good gender analysis would really point us out to, for instance, gender relations in the community. Even sex roles is important. What the challenge of understanding diversity, especially in the context of LGBTQI plus, is to link that with sex roles of the binary of men, of being male and female in community development, both at the private and public sphere. The challenge with projects is that it's always in the public sphere. And we know that the public sphere is always that there are barriers for the participation of women, no, at the onset already in development projects at the public sphere. But while they may be able to participate in private or private spheres, that's an entirely different dynamics when you bring them out at the community level to participate in project and development. And that exacerbates even the conditions of participation that's there for LGBTQI plus for that community. Because then that binary, that stereotypical notion of sex roles or gender roles stays, it can permeate very hard in communities. So in some infrastructure projects that we're doing, women, one of the important things that we do is to involve women, for instance, in civil works, in infrastructure projects. And if you go to communities, for instance, in rural areas in the Philippines, women are stereotypically, women are taught from the beginning that construction work is not for them. That construction work is only for women. I'm sorry, for men. And if that kind of thinking is present at the community level, how much more for LGBTQI plus? How much more for a trans man or a trans women who wants to get into that domain? So then it boils down to, again, really doing that research, really knowing how the community functions, how they look at gender roles, how they look at sex roles. Then only can we impact on respect, on knowing where they want to go, how they want the development approaches to be designed, and how it can be implemented with inclusion in mind.
Thank you, Bong. Do our participant has any questions for him?
Yeah, I have a question. Kind of following off of that. From all your years of experience of work, do you have any particular strategies that you use when working with resistant governments or communities? Yeah.
Okay, in the Philippines, we have gender laws in place, and there are policies already issued by national government agencies, particularly, for instance, the Philippine Commission on Women. And basically, my first strategy is to see if the local government units apply these laws and policies. And that's a good entry, and in fact, that's a good entry point. For instance, they are allowed to produce annual GAD plans, gender and development plans, and budgets. In fact, we have a policy that says 5% of the total agency budget should be devoted to gender equality. And we're lucky to have these laws and these policies. And even if I'm working from multilateral organizations, or now, for instance, from a development bank, when we partner with local government units, we look at that. And if they are having a hard time doing this basic or complying to these basic laws and policies, we assess them to be at par with the requirements of the law. So there's some sort of a good entry point that building that rapport to do gender equality together, rather than making them act on it on their own. Because what we're understanding is that nobody, national government agencies and local government units appreciate equality, no matter what ideology or perspective they're coming in. But that leveling word of equality is appreciated by all, and we use that to further deepen whatever actions they have or whatever understanding they have in the work. Another strategy is at the onset of practice or building that relationship with partners on the ground, I always make sure that they know I come from the LGBTQI sector, that I am LGBT, because then somehow it gives me a good footing to advocate for the issues of inclusion. for development practitioners, when we go to the community, that's all that they will see of us. Development workers who are here to either mess up our lives or make our lives better. But I always go down at the personal level and introduce the life that I live. For instance, I'm same-sex parenting, so I have a partner who's also male, and together we have a daughter. She's now 18 years old, and so then. But when you introduce life like that, it's a non-binary, non-traditional family setup, then you're able to bring that concept of inclusion. You are able to bring that concept of diversity very comfortably, and building on the experience of the life you live. For instance, telling them stories about how difficult it was for us to access services for our girl, because every time, for our little girl, because every time we go to social services at the local government units, they would always look for her mom. Where's the mother of this girl? Why is she being accompanied by 2 males? What will happen to this girl? How is she going to grow up? So these stories bring in that perspective at the personal level. It tugs at the heart, and then opens up the mind to possibilities that in fact they are living with LGBT families, and that they're working with one who have that experience over the years. Then they become more comfortable in talking about those issues with you. And along the ways, we found allies, even LGBT groups who doesn't want to talk about that begin to open up because they find you as an ally in the context of development. There are a lot of LGBT groups that I have worked with who doesn't even want to talk about diversity, who doesn't even want to talk about social inclusion. And it's then very important for us to break that and make them vocal about it by talking about their own experiences. Because they always think that when we talk of LGBTQI, so GSC or inclusion, it's theories and concepts. But no, it's really experiences that makes the conversation more.
Sorry, guys. There will be now another speaker in the room. Some technical issue, we are not being able to see the message from the.
Noon, I have just a question. I wasn't sure if maybe I kind of lost my line. I wasn't able to really get it.
Okay.
But then what were the challenges that you have encountered, in the regional level when you try to integrate, promote for, trans rights, and how do these multilateral agencies, because we know there are bureaucratic systems, and I just wanted to know more about the challenges.
Yeah, the challenges is about the first thing that the understanding of the development practitioners is very strict to when this comes to LGBTI rights. It's very strict to those type of marriage equalities, those type of what is called the inclusion issue or something like that. And it's kind of but they have not much knowledge about the trans people, especially in the trans people in the kind of the definition in around Asia and the Pacific, because they tend to adopt the definition from that developed from the Western country, and they use that type of what is called definition and impose it to our country. So that's why it's challenging. Sorry, that's why it's challenging for me to explain about what kind of what is our needs and what is actually the achievement that we count, right? So, and the second one is about the challenge within our own communities, because we came across those thoughts that okay, some of the people is that our communities, our in the people who work in the about the trans right also focus only on the legal gender recognition, which is not I think only legal gender recognition, okay, you will not get discriminated, right? But also you need to think about to change the structure also when you are include in the same system, but the system is very binary, it's very like, you know, patriarchal. How those systems can interact with transgender also. For example, in the country that, you know, the social welfare is really like binary, and how the social welfare such as that, you know, they are some of the countries sanitation is included in the what's called included in the social welfare, right? But how is what that kind of welfare is gonna mean for the transgender people life also when we are recognized as the woman. But again, if we are recognized as a woman, we're gonna extend the same right as the woman. But transgender people is kind of like have a different life, have different experience, and we need something that's more specific to address our issues also. And we have something in common to the woman also, right? So that's kind of like we need to a little bit think more about the social and economic right also. It's not that's only like, you know, civil rights that you are recognized as a citizen, and then what? You cannot access to the other rights. You cannot, and also the legal approach is not everything. Legal approach is only a side of, you know, transgender life, and we need to also advocate, not just only with the governments also, but we need to also advocate with the, you know, economic development practitioners. We need to advocate for the people who work with technology also to actually recognize and do something that serves trans right also. And yeah, is that what I think? And yeah, and also that like I said, we don't have that much gender transformative programs around here, so that they include us in the consultation when they're gonna create when they plan on gonna create the some of the new project. But again, we don't have the decision making power that what we actually need or we actually don't need. And some of the development practitioners have something in mind already what they're gonna do. They just include us to tick the box of the inclusion. They just include us to tick the box of like, you know, we include transgender people in the consultation already, so that's done. But again, we need to in my opinion, we need more transgender people to sit in those kind of like decision-making position, and also as well as the what is called as well as the trans leader also in the leading position also. That's why we that is one of the way that we can amplify our voice in those in different approach of the development. Yeah.
I think Prabha have a question. I saw you lower up the hand, the symbol.
Hi, yes, I was actually about to type my question, but that's okay. Sorry, because I saw Emily was I saw Emily type you know, her question, so I thought everyone should also type their questions. Anyway, so hi Noon, how are you?
Hi.
So my question is, what do you think is next for Thailand? Because I've been to Thailand many times, and it seems that Thailand compared to Indonesia, I'm from Indonesia, Thailand seems to be you know, a few steps ahead Indonesia in terms of inclusion. Although correct me if I'm wrong, although a few years ago I read on the news that there's a trans woman trying to be a lecturer in one university, but then again she could not get in because she's being a trans woman. So yeah, my question is, what is next for Thailand?
What's next for Thailand is that, so now in terms of social exception, we have very like what is called, it's very like positive this day. People, well, it's kind of like the exception of people is more progressive than the others country around this region, right? Trans people walk on the street, they don't get hit, they don't get abused. But unfortunately, we don't have the legal recognition for transgender people and also marriage equality. That's why there are no guarantee that sometimes mindset of the people might change over time. Sometimes there's some of the LGBT issue might be politicized because we have the crackdown of the democracy situation here also, and the gender issue is used and politicized a lot around this region in our country. So if the mindset of the people shift because of some of the people like try to make the LGBT community look bad, there are no guarantee that we're not gonna get like abused or we're not gonna get like bullied in this country. And also we have the anti-discrimination law already, and in gender identity is one of the what is called the protected ground. But again, the implementation is very weak, and the company or individuals doesn't listen to the because we have only the committee and to give the recommendation to the perpetrators, right? But there are lack of the legal enforcement in the law. So that's why they might do something, but their mindset doesn't change. So there are no guarantee that they're not going to do it again, or they try to like, sneakily out of the law or something like that. Yes.
Right. Thank you, Noon.
Oh, hello everyone. This is room 3, yeah?
Yes, hi.
Okay. Do you have any reactions to my presentation? Questions? I mean, it doesn't have to be questions. You could be sharing your experience as well, or what you learn in a piece of research or project or whatever. Yeah, one thing that I didn't have time to explain more when I did my presentation was this question about trans women and women, and it is controversial. Actually, when was it? 2 years ago? Was it last year? In the Pride March in London, there was a feminist group that actually expelled trans women from their contingent, their float. And this became a very controversial thing. I mean, well, you're not women, so things like that. I mean, but I think I like what Bong said. But if you're allies, you just join, and then sometimes in Indonesia now we cannot have pride marches anymore, but in Timor-Leste, for example, if you are not sure about your own, openness, hi Nalia, you pretend you're, I don't know, whatever. It happened even in organizations, actually. I said, "Oh, sir, I'm only doing HIV." Okay, fine. 3 months later, excuse me for not being honest. I'm actually gay. So, things like that. So, but back to the thing, the Indonesian National Commission on Women I think about 3-4 years ago, made a policy that trans women are social women, and so they can be included in their in programming for women. So that's something that I mean that you know, I would have said, if I had more time, I would have said that in my presentation. But is there any reactions, or is it like confusing?
I guess oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm interested to hear about, I guess it was kind of similar to the question I asked before, but how you go about working with governments who might be resistant, especially if they're religious. How do you push the progress?
That's a change. Number one, you sometimes have to you know what you're doing, but you don't call it what you need to call it. You disguise it. For example, even the name APCOM, when we started in 2007, we call it Asia Pacific Coalition on Male Sexual Health. So, you know, I mean, we could not say, you know, I mean, like Noon's organization, International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, they can do that because they're based in Thailand. If they were in Indonesia, they would be attacked by some Islamist vigilante group the next day. Things like that, yeah. Anyway, so number one, you know how kind of to lie, but I mean to disguise your program sometimes. Although don't be careful, the bureaucrats are also not stupid. Ford Foundation Indonesia had to scrap its entire reproductive health programs because the bureaucrats know you're gonna help gay people, you're gonna help lesbians. So no more, you know. So they do water and sanitation. Human rights is fine. So this is something that you basically navigate. I mean, just to give you some information. We still do anything, believe it or not. Now, health ministries, health departments at the local level tend to be more friendly because they help people. They know. Sometimes they have the attitude, oh yeah, these poor deviants, you have to help them. Okay, thank you for being called deviants, but you know, as long as you.
Maybe can you manage it, Alexis? Or do you want to do an open forum now instead?
Let's do it here. It's okay.
Okay. Okay. Maybe let's.
Nelia, can I continue for just 1 minute?
Okay, go ahead.
What I said to.
Sure, Dede.
So Sophie actually asked, you know, and there's Noon, there's Bong here, and many people from Southeast Asia. In a sensitive environment, what do you do? So I was saying that, you know, usually health. I mean, this is of course in relation to HIV. Health departments, health authorities tend to be a bit more friendly, but sometimes in a very religion based society like in Indonesia, you do find.
It's gone.
Okay. Do you have anybody has questions? Let's do the open forum now. So,
okay.
Do you guys have? Hey, Dede, there you are. Where are you going? What did you do?
Well, I did warn you. My internet.
Yeah. You did. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So go ahead.
But basically, you know, find allies within the government, and there are some, and they usually teach you how to be careful and how to be strategic. I mean, of course, you know, if you're in Brunei Darussalam, it's just almost impossible. But in Brunei, people are doing things in the name of HIV, in the name of academia. being very careful, not to use the wrong words and things like that. I think in Southeast Asia, especially with most of our countries have had dictators, right? So some still do. Oops. You learn to be careful. That's my short answer to Sophie.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So let's open the space for,
I'm done.
thank you, Dede. And don't leave yet. Let's open the space
No.
for.
I'm not leaving. It's just that that goes off from time to time. I don't know.
No worries, no worries. So let's open the space for questions from anybody. Did anybody want to ask the panelists anything in your mind? Or is there something on the chat room? Okay, there was let me ask one of the questions that was asked in the, remember when you did the registration? We asked for the participants. So we asked them if they had questions that they can send it to us ahead of time, so we can share it with you. So there's a question here about whether, obviously I'm looking for it, and even if I have 4 eyes already, I cannot find it. But there was a question about how do you navigate gender diversity in foreign contexts. It seemed to me like the question was, although it was something that I think that Bong has started to allude to in his conversation earlier on about being careful with, and also Noon, being careful with foreign ideas that are imposed on the gender diversities and the work in our respective countries. Did you want to add anything to that? Noon, Dede, Bong, or anybody?
What is the question again?
It's about, yeah. I'm trying to look for it, but it's basically about. There it is. How do we navigate personal gender ideas with that of foreign contexts?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Should
go
I
ahead,
respond?
Noon.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I think we cannot deny that foreign context or the international context go kind of universalisms of the concept of the LGBTI right or something like that can be beneficial for the people in the country also. At the same time, we also need to be mindful that some of the concept, some of the detail in the concept is not relevant to our life. And we need to also have the good research, have a good stakeholder engagement to actually identify what is applicable or what is not applicable. And so that's because in Asia, in some way, so for example, the marriage equalities, right? So the marriage equality is criticized as the idea that gay people, not exclude anyone, but gay people kind of like you want this marriage equality or you want the same-sex marriage to pass on the privilege that they have already, to pass on their status, financial status, to pass on their inheritance, to pass on those type of things. That's kind of excuse. So that's why we need to, but it's based on the life of the white gay man. It's not the life of the gay people in this region, because gay people in this region don't have that much privilege. So that's why we need to be mindful that we need to say that the marriage equality is not everything. It's not the huge achievement. We need to look in the detail that what actually the life of gay men, what they need more, what they need less, what's gonna undermine maybe they need criminalization of the same-sex relation at the first place, not marriage qualities. And we need to prioritize because all the policy making or the development take the resources. We have the limited resources on that. So that's why we cannot do everything, and we need to prioritize well in this region. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Noon. Did you want to add anything to that, Dede?
No, I agree. I mean, already sometimes, I was trained as a linguist actually. That's why, same-sex marriage. When it comes to trans women, what is same-sex, right? Most trans women have their partners that are men. Not all, but so many. Is that same? It's already, and I agree with Noon that sometimes it's just not practical. When just coming out is a problem, how do you get married? Now, what's interesting in Indonesia is that lesbian women, including working class women, they like to be married. And so there are not many, but there are some cases where one kind of the butch partner, the more masculine-looking partner of the lesbian couple, falsifies their ID card, goes to the marriage office, sometimes succeeds, and then somebody finds out, oh, she falsified, she faked the card, and ended up in jail. So it's tragic, but I try to explain in terms of the almost obsession in Indonesian society of marriage. I mean, heterosexual marriage. I don't know, but it's but certainly I completely agree with Noon that there are other things. Decriminalization certainly for Malaysia, Singapore. I mean, the Singapore politicians always say, "Oh yeah, we're not going to implement." Yeah, right, but the police could actually still blackmail you. There you go. And in Indonesia, it's except for Aceh and a few other districts, it's not criminalized, but they find other ways of actually harassing gay men and certainly trans women, because many trans women are in public places, busking and sometimes just begging, because they are so poor. So they find different ways of actually harassing. And this is something that we really still, we still need to work on these things.
Yeah, because I think that you might be surprised that there are a lot of kind of like thought around the, you might be surprised that we might end up with, the recommendation that the benefit related to marriage should all be canceled. We might end up like that. We need to end up like that. It might end up like that. We don't know. So yeah, it's based on the context and of the life of the people. So don't bring the people in the table first, and then we can look at the theory. So it's gonna be
true. I kind of like that. I mean, talking about marriage, isn't it true, Noon, that in Thailand many heterosexual married couples don't have a legal certificate, right? Is that true?
Yeah, they don't have it.
See, there it is. In Indonesia, okay, marriage, with all the obsession, about, I think 30%, usually poor people, homeless people, are not like legally married.
All right. Dede, there's a last question here. Sorry, I'm gonna interrupt you.
No,
sorry, we have 3 minutes to go. But I wanted to accommodate this question because I think it's important and it's very relevant at this time. What do you think will happen to gender rights amidst the specter of COVID-19? We're going to entertain that as our last question for the session. So what do you think will happen to gender rights amidst the specter of COVID-19? Any one of you three can answer the question, please.
I'll let somebody else do it.
Bong?
Bong, maybe you.
Okay. What's shaping is that if there are inequality issues that has not been resolved pre-COVID, these inequality inequality issues are magnifying now for all, especially in the diversity context. So the experience in the Philippines is that the fallback really is on strengthening the delivery of basic services. But we know that the delivery of basic services, even pre-COVID, is already biased towards, for instance, a binary approach, or biased already towards those who are documented, those who can show proof of residence, those who can so forth and so, or proof of family, for instance. So we see some big sector being marginalized. In the Philippines, for instance, we have there's a strategy called ayuda, or it's help, monetary help for families or even for individuals who are finding it hard to survive the lockdown, to survive. But if you look at to survive quarantine, but if you look at the requirements that's being asked, right away you will know that some sectors, especially in the LGBTQI+, are not qualified to get that kind of assistance, mainly because they cannot show a marriage license, for instance. They cannot show identity cards being male or female, or partly because they are not considered as family, for instance, and therefore some of this, and therefore they disqualify. But over and above that, the lockdown have also given us a sad picture of gender-based violence, especially those who are locked in with partners or with family members who have been committing gender-based violence pre-COVID, and we're seeing this also again magnifying now. If I may use the term, it's double whammy. You are cut off. You are cut off from the services that's afforded by local governments or national governments, and at the same time you're locked in a situation that can bring about gender-based violence, especially for the diversity groups, LGBTQI, people with disabilities, and even senior citizens.
All right, thank you, Bong. It's 4:30 by my watch. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Can we get one advices for 30-second advices from Bong, Dede, and Noon, and then let's ask Lapland to close. Okay, 30-second advices from each of you, please.
Who starts?
Dede.
Okay. I think it's it is a complex issue, but actually if you have heart and you are willing to listen, and and you're sincere in your approach, you'll do it, and you'll keep learning. It's from the people who need your development work most.
Yeah. Thank you, Dede. Noon?
Yeah, what I would say is that you can relearn a bit more. You can relearn, you can unlearn the thing that you have learned already, and try to listen more when you work with the communities. And then you should also challenge the norm that exists and question about your approach, that is work with the community or not. And yeah, for me, it's only about the challenge the norm and the participation, and you can unlearn something also.
Okay, thank you, Noon. Bong, please. Bong?
More about being sensitive to the needs of people, community. That's starting point. If we're able to build capacities, either capacities around sensitivity, then we can move on to looking at equality as a leveling off platform for development to happen. So, I think as development practitioners over the years, I learned that to be honest, with the learnings that you have, to be honest with what you do not understand in terms of gender equality and diversity is really is wisdom. And always ask questions. If you are in doubt, surround yourselves with experts, work with networks who have been doing this kind of work for the longest time because they have that knowledge. So there you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let me call Lachlan. Lachlan is the president of MIDPA to do the closing.
Thanks, Nelia. So I guess first to start, I would just like to say a massive thank you, Noon, Bong, and Dede, for giving up your time and coming along to speak to us. I've read all your biographies, and you're highly accomplished individuals, and so for us to be able to hear from all three of you is an incredible privilege. And I don't want to diminish any previous events that I've ever been to. I think this is one of the most interesting and engaging educational seminars that I've been to in any of my university experience. It's absolutely fascinating. All three of you had very different perspectives, but also some similar things, and coming from different countries. It was fascinating to hear about those experiences, and I think all of us will be better off for that, for our future studies and our future work. And like Noon said, it's part of our process of both learning and also unlearning, so that we can be more effective practitioners, more effective allies, more effective friends and family members. And so I'd just like to thank you very much. And also a massive thank you to the very talented team led by Nelia, who have pulled the event together as well. So thank you all. I hope you've enjoyed the event as much as I have. And we look forward to seeing you at a future MIDPA event later in the semester.
Hey.
Thank you, Lachlan. Again, also, may I say thank you on behalf of the team, Noon, Dede, and Bong. Your time, it's really appreciated. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll ask you to evaluate, but I'll set evaluation links. All right. Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.